Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another field strip video. And today's field strip video is going to be on a rifle I recently did a range report and review on. This is the Sig Sauer MCX Virtus. Now I do believe this is a later generation. I'm not really sure about the specifics of all of the different generations. I do know the recoil assembly of this one is definitely different than some of the early models. So this might not apply to the gun you have, but you will have to figure that out for yourself. So let's go ahead and take this thing apart. It definitely comes apart a lot different than an AR-15, but there are some similarities. First thing we're going to do is drop this magazine and of course ensure that there is no ammunition. We'll set the magazine aside, turn the gun over, pull that charging handle back, and as you can see, we are empty. We want to visually inspect that chamber. We're now going to turn the gun back over, put that gun on safe. So the next thing we're going to need will be a towel. You might need a punch and a hammer of some kind. So I'm going to take this towel and put it under the receiver here, so when I punch out the pins, they will not get damaged. So we're going to start here in the back. Now, even though this is very similar to an AR-15, these pins are in there a lot tighter because the lockup between the upper and the lower receiver is much tighter. So we'll go ahead and gently just tap out that back pin and get the front pin started as well. And once it gets out so far, we can kind of pull it out from the other side. So we'll put that aside there, turn this over. And we'll go ahead and pull out these pins. There's one and there's two. And now we can separate the upper and the lower receiver. And there is our lower receiver, and that's as far as we need to go there. Next thing we're going to do is pull out the charging handle. So now we can pull out the whole bolt carrier assembly with the recoil springs and our charging handle. We can now go to the front of the upper receiver, and if the lower receiver is off the firearm and you've pulled that pin out, you should be able to get this handguard off the front. Now sometimes this is on here a little bit tight, but let's see how we can do here. There we go. And that simply comes right off the front of the gun. There is our handguard. And then we can get access here to the gas system. And so to get the gas system out, all you have to do is push this little detent in and then rotate the gas plug. And then it should come out the front of the firearm. And then we can get the piston out. So I'll go ahead and push this detent in, rotate this gas plug, and it should pop out the front. And it's in there a little bit tight because we do have some gas rings. There is the plug. And now the whole piston should simply come out the front of the gun. And that is about as far as you have to field strip the upper receiver. If you want to take off the barrel, you can by pulling these screws off right here, and the whole barrel assembly will come off the front. But for cleaning, you don't need to do that. So now let's take a look at this recoil system up here. And so in order to get all of this stuff off, you're going to need this punch again. And so up on the top of the bolt carrier, you're going to see a little pin that goes through what is essentially the recoil spring assembly. You can push this pin all the way through. Make sure to catch it on the other side. Right there. Set that aside. And that is going to allow you to remove this little hammer. I guess we're going to call it a shroud or something. I'm not really sure what it is. It's more of like a disconnect between the hammer and the recoil system. I do know it has a name, but you got to get that out. And then once that is out, you can rotate this up and the recoil assembly comes off the side of the carrier. And this can be on here a little bit tight. Sometimes you got to finagle it off, and there it goes. And that is all you have to do for the recoil spring assembly. Some of the earlier generations, these parts came off a lot easier, but right now they are pinned in place. Sig sells the complete assembly, and I hear it's actually pretty affordable. They don't want you to take this apart any further. I guess you could if you pushed out those pins, but I think the idea is that this is the rifle of the future, and they want it to be designed for military use. And I guess as the saying goes, if you put two Marines and a ball bearing in a room and come back in an hour, the ball bearing will be broken because I guess they don't think and trust soldiers to be able to take care of their equipment. So if this was easily disassembled, they think soldiers in the field are going to lose parts. So they don't want you taking that apart. So you don't have to take that down any further. And so now, to get the bolt carrier further disassembled, we have the pin in the back which holds in the firing pin. We can push that through. The firing pin will come out with the spring, and we can now rotate that cam pin just like an AR-15, pull that out. We can now take the bolt out of the carrier, and if you want to go all the way, you can take the same punch and push out. It might go one way, I think. You can push out this pin for the extractor, and there is that pin, and the extractor simply comes off. And that is a complete field strip of a Sig Sauer MCX Virtus. All right, so let me clean up these parts and let's put this thing back together. All right, so we got this gun all cleaned up and wiped down, so let's put it back together. We're gonna go in the reverse order of disassembly, almost like always, and we're gonna go ahead and take the bolt and the extractor, put that in there. Then we'll take the extractor pin and put it through the bolt. Sometimes this can be a little bit tricky, but that one went in pretty darn fast. So the bolt is now back together. We'll put the bolt in the carrier, make sure the extractor is facing the correct way, line everything up, and then we can put in the cam pin and rotate the cam pin, push that bolt forward. Now we can put the firing pin with the spring back in the carrier, and you're going to have to put some pressure on that before you push that pin all the way through. So I'll take this punch again and just depress that spring, and I can then push that pin, and now the bolt carrier is back together. So now we got what I think is kind of the hardest part of the reassembly here, and that is putting on this recoil spring assembly onto the carrier. So the first thing you're going to do is this little rounded notch here is going to once again slide back into the carrier. Has to go all the way, and make sure everything lines up with the top of the carrier so it's looking like it should. That's really important, because if it's not, this next piece will not go on correctly. And here is that one piece I was telling you about. I'm not really sure again about the name of this, and this can be a little bit tricky to put on. And so essentially you got to get this hole through this piece lined up where that pin is going to go through, and this can look a little bit odd. So what you got to do is put it in where you can read the letter S, and I'm not really sure what the S stands for in this particular model, and I don't know if it's on every one of these parts, but for me this is how I remember this going together. And you have to go from the top, and that little hook goes through the back of the carrier, as you can see right there. That's how you know it's in there correctly. And then you got to line up that hole with that other part in the recoil spring assembly. And this is where things for me get a little bit tricky. And if it doesn't go in just right, this can really slow down this process. So let's see if I can do this here. Hopefully I can get it relatively quick here on camera. I've done this a couple of times now, and I've actually had some difficulty each time. So the reason I think this is so difficult is because it is under spring tension. So let's see if we can get this piece in, and there we go. And it is now lined up with that hole. As I said, that is the trickiest part there. And then we can take this pin and put it through once everything is lined up. And there we go. And so now the bolt carrier assembly with the recoil spring assembly is back together, and we can now set that aside. All right, so now let's focus our attention to the upper receiver and the handguard and the piston system. So the piston system is going to need to go in first. So you're going to push the piston in, small side facing the back, or the op rod, and make sure that goes all the way in. Then we're going to put this plug in, and there are going to be some cutouts that correspond to the channel that it has to rotate in. So all of these lugs have to be in the upward direction when you insert it, and then you're going to rotate it after pushing in that detent. So Push this in there. Once again, it has those gas rings, so that can make the insertion a little bit tight. And then once you know it's moving in that channel correctly, turn the receiver over, push that detent, and then you can rotate that gas plug all the way in. And of course you have two settings there, so remember which setting you originally had the firearm on. Now you can take the handguard and put it over the barrel. Take your time here and make sure it lines up with the corresponding slots on the upper receiver, and it should slide all the way on and all the way to the back. And you know it's all the way on when that little piece lines up with the takedown slots and the holes for those pins. And at this time we can turn the receiver over here and turn it upside down. We can put in our charging handle, and then we can put in our bolt carrier with the recoil spring assembly. Make sure that goes all the way in. And sometimes I've found this can be a little bit tricky. I think I had the dust cover door closed, so if you have that, it won't go all the way. And then there we go. Now it's all the way in. So let's grab that lower receiver. Make sure everything lines up. Make sure those pins are lining up. Let's do the front pin first, and then the rear pin. Close the upper on the lower. Close that up. Then of course do a little function check. Just make sure everything's working. And then you can reinsert the magazine. And there we go. That is a complete field strip and reassembly of the Sig MCX Virtus. I hope this helps someone in the future, because this gun is a lot more difficult to take apart than an AR-15. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.